Hello there everyone. How you doing today? I hope you're all well. Today I'm going to read you a story written by OBVIO. My dead dog came back to say goodbye. He wasn't alone. Vigo was with me for over 10 years. I got him when I was a sophomore in high school. I still remember bringing him home, a little boxer puppy in my arms. A year after graduating, I moved out of my parents' place to live with a couple of friends, and he stayed with my parents while I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment that didn't allow pets. Eventually, one of my roommates met a girl. They hit it off and moved in together. My remaining friend and I moved into a bottom floor 2-bedroom apartment. It was in a smaller, nicer complex that allowed pets, and I was finally able to have Vigo live with me. He lived with me for 6 years before his illness started catching up to him. Vigo started developing heart conditions 2 years before he passed. At first, he would lay down at random moments during a walk. Then I started noticing he would pass out suddenly while we were at home. Exercise soon became something he could no longer do. It broke me to see him slow down when he got older, as he was always such an energetic dog. Vigo passed away suddenly while at home. I was well aware this could happen due to his pre-existing conditions, but as much as I had told myself I was ready, it was hard to imagine how you'll feel before it happens. He passed on Sunday morning. The rest of the day was rough for me, and I couldn't bring myself to move his things. In order to try and distract myself, I still went to work on Monday, and the rest of the week. I definitely overworked myself that week, all while dreading the upcoming weekend. The first whole weekend I would spend without Vigo. My roommate Zeke, noticing I was running on little sleep just by glancing at me, offered me some weed before he went out on Friday night. As usual, I declined the offer. I'm in the minority nowadays, but I've never been the biggest fan of smoking weed. I much prefer to have a drink. Come on, Tom, come along with us, invite your girl Emily, Zeke urged me again before walking out. She's actually working late tonight. She said she'll come over tomorrow. I'm just gonna try and get some rest for now, I said, laying on the living room sofa, watching TV while he opened the front door. Well, suit yourself. And if you change your mind, you know where my stash is. I got some pre-made joints I made yesterday. It'll help you sleep and likely put you in a better mood, Zeke said before walking out the door, shutting and locking it behind him. It was past midnight when I finally got up from the living room couch and headed to my room. Vigo's bed and empty bowls greeted me when I walked in. He had slept in my room ever since he had moved in with me. All of his things were still laid against the left wall of my room, as if he were still around. Good night, buddy, I said out loud. I then laid down on my bed and closed my teary eyes, trying to sleep. I gave up after tossing and turning for over an hour. Getting up, I walked over to Zeke's room and was greeted by a certain smell when I walked in. Zeke is most definitely a stoner who will dabble into other drugs, but only on occasion. He doesn't let weed interfere with his life and usually only smokes at home. Whatever I smelled in his room, though, that was not weed. It was a musty smell, and if I asked him about it, I'm sure his answer would start with, "So I know a guy." Inside his room, I walked to the dresser on the far wall and opened the third drawer on the left. A medium-sized wooden tea box was tucked in the back of the drawer. I pulled it out, accidentally spilling a few of its contents out, and set it on his bed as I opened it. There were various strains to choose from, all organized and labeled separately in small glass jars and Ziploc bags and in different compartments. I pulled out the 2 bags that contained pre-made joints, looking for any that may draw my attention, also picking up everything I spilled as I did so. The contents of 2 of the 8 compartments had almost completely spilled out. One of the near-empty sections had 2 joints in another Ziploc bag that caught my eye. revealed only after spilling everything that happened to be sitting on top. Some of the herbs inside them had a dark blue hue about them. My favorite color is blue, I thought to myself before pulling one out of the bag, making my decision like a child choosing his favorite toy or candy. I held the joint in one hand, putting the box away with the other. Grabbing the lighter and ashtray from Zeke's nightstand, I walked back to my bedroom. I opened my bedroom window to air out the weed that was about to stink up my room. After lighting it, I immediately noticed I did not smell like normal weed. I still held it up to my lips and inhaled a few times. My lungs burned. I started coughing, choking, also because of the smell the smoke produced. It smelled like weed, but also burnt plastic, specifically like a shoe store that caught fire. The taste wasn't half bad. It was a little sweet. Holy shit, I said, trying to fan out the smoke with my other hand. I stuck my head out the window before taking another huff. What are you doing? I thought to myself before walking to the ashtray and putting it out. I continued coughing for a few minutes before turning off the lights and laying back in bed. The smell was still prevalent, but I was starting to feel very relaxed, very mellow and at peace with myself. I'm not sure when I fell asleep. I only noticed I passed out when something woke me up. A moist sensation ran up my arm. I assumed it was Vigo licking my arm and upper hand. Licking was a habit he developed in his old age. It was a means to let me know he needed to go outside to relieve himself. He did this almost every night. I pet his head, not yet fully aware that I was touching my alive, again, dead dog. "Do you need to go outside, boy?" I said to him before opening my eyes. I then registered what was going on and jolted out of my bed and turned on the lights. The room now illuminated and revealed that it was my dog, only he looked different. I was shocked. Vigo looked at me happily, using his whole body to wag his tail, something he hadn't done in a long time. "Vigo? Hey boy, what are you doing here?" I said, slowly getting closer and kneeling down to pet him. He was as happy as can be, leaning up against me and jumping around while I rubbed and patted his back. From up close, I could see his coat had a darker hue and more shine to it. This was my dog, just younger somehow. I held his head up to mine and saw the fur on his face was back to brown and black. His last couple years, I had given him the nickname Little Ghost Face, due to the white hairs that accumulated on his head. He really did look like he was wearing a mask. I estimated this was the Vigo from about 5 years ago. My dog was back in his prime, both happy and healthy. After playing with him for a while, I looked around, trying to find anything else that seemed off, out of place, or odd. I had to be dreaming, but everything felt so real. I looked out the window and saw that it was still completely dark out. The clock on my nightstand read that it was 2:20 a.m. I'd only slept for 15 minutes at most. It felt like I had been out for hours. "Where did you come from, buddy?" I then asked, looking at him attentively. Vigo acted like his normal younger self for a few minutes, before walking over to my closed bedroom door and scratching at it. "What is it, you actually want to go outside?" I asked him. He continued scratching at the door before excitedly letting out a high-pitched screech that, well, it answered my question. I walked over and opened the bedroom door. Vigo took off towards the living room. I assumed he was waiting by the door, but through the darkness I could see he was on his hind legs, leaning his front paws on someone who was sitting on the sofa. I then turned the lights on and instantly saw it wasn't Zeke. This person was facing away from me and towards the TV. The back of their head was shaved and they had big hoop-like earrings. "Hello," I said. "Who are you?" No response was garnered from the mysterious figure who was steadily petting my dog. Vigo was very happy to see this person. It was obvious he knew her and I had no idea how. Oddly enough, I wasn't afraid and proceeded to walk towards him, talking and asking more questions as I got closer. I've never seen you before. Are you Zeke's friend or something? I asked, walking over and around the sofa. My dog looked at me and wagged his tail when I got near. From up close I could tell it was a woman, with a completely shaved head dressed in strange garments. She had a loose-fitting tan dress that almost matched her skin tone. It looked like it was torn to shreds, with many threads and pieces of the dress hanging off all over. She didn't look homeless. What she wore looked ancient, like something an old civilization once wore. The lady gave me a soothing sense of calmness. Her gold earrings glowed with a minimal amount of light. The ceiling bulbs produced. She smiled at me, or at least she would have if she had a face. She looked somehow familiar. There was a void where her face should have been, yet she looked like someone I had seen before. There was a protruding portion in the middle of her face that looked to be a snout. Despite having almost no facial features and not saying a single word, she seemed to convey exactly what she was here for. I knelt down when my dog came back to me after having been on her lap. Vigo spun and jumped at me excitedly, almost pushing me against the wall. I got up, and he did the same. Standing on his back legs, he stretched his body up against mine. He held his head up and looked at me. I hunched to be face to face with him, petting him while he stood. He seemed to calm down for a second. I'm not sure how I knew, but this was it. His farewell. He gave me one last happy scratch and licked my face. Clearly told to do so, Vigo jumped off me before the mysterious lady stood up. She then faced my way and nodded her head once. I respectfully did the same. The lady never took a single step. She seemingly just hovered over the front door and went straight through it. My dog followed her up to the door and waited. Looking over to me, Vigo wanted me to open the door for him. I walked over and unlocked and opened the door. What I saw was beautiful. It was some kind of vehicle, glistening and shining just like her earrings. She was inside waiting for my dog. Vigo ran over to it, whatever it was. He looked over to me for a brief moment and then stepped inside. I could still see them sitting within, though through what I can only describe as windows. The whole thing seemed to shine even brighter for a brief moment, and then suddenly began to move forward. It wasn't until they had begun to move that I saw they had a third passenger. It seemed to be another canine. It looked out towards me from the back window, and I immediately recognized him. That was my childhood dog. He passed away when I was 5. It was Cooper. His curly white fur and eraser pink nose were unmistakable. I smiled, for in that moment I felt truly happy. My girl woke me up the next morning, asking me why the front door was unlocked, what had been burning, and why I was sleeping on the living room couch. I looked around myself while I still sat on the couch. Had that really happened? I asked myself. Emily found the joint in my room. There was no point in lying to her about having smoked something besides weed, which she was very obviously against. It didn't take a regular smoker to know what I had smoked was something else. She opened it all at the windows in our apartment to air out the smell. About me sleeping on the couch, I told her it had gotten hot in my room after smoking, so I walked down to get some fresh air. I told her I had forgotten to lock the door before sitting on the couch and falling asleep. Zeke had crashed at a friend's house that night and got home after noon. Emily reprimanded him and demanded to know exactly what I had smoked that night. He laughed when he saw the bag and still had the other joint in it and said it was changa. Neither of us knew exactly what that meant. Emily looked it up and asked me if I had any hallucinations. I lied, of course, and noticed Zeke looked at me with a slight grin. He knew I was lying. I never told her what I saw that night, but I know it did me good and gave me closure. Emily was obviously upset at Zeke, but she and I actually had a good weekend. I eventually told Zeke what I saw. He was intrigued, especially because of the herb blend, also contained a high amount of blue lotus. "Never go digging around in my stash again. If you want some weed, I'll give it to you personally," he said, before reiterating that there are positives and negatives to taking most drugs and hallucinogenics. They have their place in moderation, I remember he said in standard Zeke fashion. That was a few weeks ago, and I thought about what I had hallucinated fondly up until yesterday. I accompanied Emily to the funeral and burial of our dear Aunt Angela. Emily has a big family, and the funeral home was packed. I looked around, surprised at the amount of people that had showed up. It didn't take me long to notice it. I saw a similar entity among the crowd, more humanoid with no snout and of male composition. He moved past everyone, his tone and shredded robe flowing in non-existent wind, no longer under the influence. This time I was afraid. The specter stood by her casket. His ancient bracelet seemed to illuminate his surroundings. His faceless form looked at me no matter where I moved. It took me everything to stay calm. He was also present during her burial. He showed up riding one of those things. There were other occupants. I recognized a few of them from an old photo album of Emily's family. Angela was present during her own funeral. None of her relatives could see, only I. She smiled at me. I then saw her walk over to the glistening craft. I saw her hop on board, and I saw him take her away. That is the end of today's video. If you enjoyed, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. I will see you all next time. Bye bye.